Welcome to the Ozzstar Cars channel. Today I've got this '05 Tundra right here behind me. Today I want to share with you some brake line information. I had to replace the brake lines, the small ones that feed the calipers here on this truck. I did a full brake job all the way around, and I want to show you the difference in fittings and some tips and tricks that I use. So let's go check it out. So let me show you the old brake line that came off the driver's side. Now I have this capped off right here, and I'll tell you why I did that in a second. This was the fitting that was all rusty on there, and it's sheared off from the end. Here's the other end. Now these were cheap enough from Toyota to buy them factory. They have the bends, they already have the new fittings. This is a new one. This is for the passenger side, which I'm going to show you in a minute. But here's something important that you need to know with these Toyotas and other cars too, Euro cars. Many different makes, Japanese cars, they have different types of fittings. So even though this is a 10 millimeter, they call this a 10 millimeter by 1.0 thread pitch. See how this is threaded all the way to the end? Now if you look at the other end of this, which goes to the brake hose, this is what's called a non-threaded lead, I guess you can call it, right here. So you can see, let me bring it in real close for you. You see how it's smooth on the very tip of it? There are no threads, where this one, we've got threads all the way to the end. Okay? So you want to keep that in mind if you're going to make up your own brake line, that you use the proper fitting, flare nut fitting here for the proper connection that you're making, because you don't want to have a leak. So a lot of times these things will snap, they'll break, which is not a fun day, right? Especially if it's a hard to get to. These spin on, if you're not familiar, these spin on the line. This happens to be 3/16 inch brake line here, and it's flared on the end right there. Let me show you. There's a flare that this seals. Maybe you can see it. The double, what is it, double inverted deal, whatever they call it, bubble flare. Where is it? Right here on the end. You see this right here? So that seals up against there and then goes in. Anyhow, what I was going to say is, what they'll do is, a lot of times they rust on the outside here. Obviously on the thread you can see some rust on this old one, but behind it, back in this area, the rust will build up between the fitting and the line, and you go to twist these off and it'll actually snap, which is what happened down here. You can see this one sheared off. Okay, so let me show you some tricks on the truck on trying to prevent this. You can't always prevent it. Sometimes you just got to replace it. But let's go over there and check it out. So since these are 10 millimeters, the first thing you want to do is, if you have it, is a flare nut wrench. So get one of these. So it looks like an open end wrench, but it comes around a little more, and there's a little slot to put this through the brake line right here. Okay, so you can get a better grip. And your best friend in these cases are going to be some kind of penetrating fluid. I use the PB blaster. That's PB seems to work good for me. Now let me get a wire brush, and the first thing you want to do is, and I hope you guys can see this okay. I don't know how well my lighting is. Let me try to adjust it for you. I got another flashlight here. Hold on a sec. Let me get that up here. Maybe you'll see it better. There we go. So take your wire brush, and you want to get the excess dirt and rust and grease and whatever else is on there on both fittings. Okay, now sometimes I've used a small torch on these to help, but get those all cleaned up. And then what I'll do is, sometimes if there's a lot of debris, I'll get a pick. Get one of these picks and just go in right around where it meets the line. If there's dirt in there, or right here where the threads actually fit in. Now this is the brake hose right here, which I think you can see. Yep. And of course this is our caliper, and we want to do the same thing here. So what we're doing is just getting all that extra crud out, and take our penetrant. Now if the lines are clean, you really don't need this stuff. Usually it'll come right off if you don't have rust. This truck is very rusty. Anyway, so, and if the longer you can let this sit in there, the better. Just keep reapplying. But what I'll do is, now I'll take my flare nut wrench. This is the 10. Slide that on there, and what I like to do, instead of like trying to push it, let me see if I can aim up a little bit. Instead of like trying to use it with my hand, like slow, I will, you can't see it, hold on. There we go. I'll try, tap it, tap it a little bit like that, or get yourself a blow hammer, or just a regular hammer, and give it a little whack. Because sometimes the vibration is good for it, to free up the rust. So that one's going to be really tight. I can already see we're going to have a problem with this one. Let me come at it at a different angle. Give it a little shot, then you can go like tighten it a little bit, loosen it, okay, back and forth, and hopefully you'll get some play action. And what I'm going to do is come over, let's see, I want to try to, this bracket is moving on me, and I'm afraid that bracket's going to snap. I think I'll put a pair of vice grips on that, just to support it a little bit on the brake hose. Make sure your ABS wire's not in the way. There we go. We'll make it a little sturdier. There we go. So I just got it clamped in right there. All right, let's try this again. I think it just moved a little bit. Let's see. Now what I like to do is get this out, because if I can thread this out, then I can kind of prevent, I think it's going to snap. Damn. Looks like it's going to snap. Let's see. Let's take our time with it. Let's do this. Let's give it a little tap. Sometimes tapping it works too. Just give it a little tap. A little vibration. Wow, it's tight. It is tight. Now if this nut, oh, I got a little bit of movement in it, nice. So let me spray it again. I just saw it, you guys can't see it from your angle, but it just moved the slightest bit. Now, what was I gonna say? Oh, if this happens to get stripped, if you're just using an open end wrench, and most likely if it's frozen, it's just gonna strip on you. Let me tell you what else you can do here. So if this strips off, if this hex nut, that 10mm strips, well, then you're gonna have to go to the vice grips. So here's like a mini pair. You see right here, we got the big pair. By the way, this dust shield back here is all loose. We'll have to do something with that. But anyway, you're gonna have to use vice grips actually to work this back and forth and to get it out. But let's keep working on this now. Oh yeah, it's definitely moving. So that's good. You gotta be patient. And try not to twist the line. If you don't twist the line, it probably won't snap on you. So just spray it again. So what you're doing is you're working that penetrant in there. There we go. And then after I get this somewhat loose, I'll go and work on this one down here. Nice. All right. I think this guy's going to come out. Even though this may come out in one piece without snapping, if we can get the other side off, I'm going to replace it because I have the replacement, so it's not worth trying to save this. I think those are like $10 if I didn't mention it. Nice. Okay. So little by little, back and forth. When you do this, you get a little friction in there too. A little heat helps. Okay, that's pretty loose. So what I want to do now is work on this one down here. Let me aim it down a little bit. Sorry for the hand. But right here on this guy now. And let's see. We already sprayed it, but let me get my spray again. Never hurts. This one looks a little more rusty. And what I was telling you earlier, where's my fitting? What I did, and the reason why I capped this off right here on the old one, is my plan is once we get this loose, I'm going to thread this guy in, and of course your fluid's going to be running out, right, as soon as we disconnect it. So instead of the master cylinder getting low and getting air in the system, we have to bleed everything. We will be anyway, because we're changing the brakes on this truck. But my point is, if you didn't want that fluid to run out, save yourself some headache. I put the cap on the end of this broken one. We'll thread this guy right into here, and that'll temporarily seal off until we can, you know, get down the road a little further, get this caliper off and stuff. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, let me get this on here. I'll give this guy a tap. Okay, this one's not bad. Not too bad. This one's gonna come out. Good. Put a little more fluid. Glad I didn't have to bust the vice grips out on this side. The other side, you saw that flare nut, it was toast. So, oh yeah, it's definitely gonna come out. Okay, great. Nice. All right, so I'm gonna snug that up just for now. And what I think I'm gonna do is release the clamp. All right, so let's loosen this brake line bracket back here. It's an 11 millimeter. There's a bolt and a nut on the back. And this bolt is pretty stiff. So let's get this loose. And it just snapped. So our bolt snapped right here. Nice. Wouldn't expect anything less. So what we'll have to do is put a new bolt through that when we're done. All right, so fortunately it didn't snap inside the bracket. Let me get the other half. Here it is here. We'll just get a replacement. No biggie. Could be worse. Now this is loose though, so that gives us some more flexibility to put a new line on. So with the brake line, or the brake line bracket loose now, I've got my little setup here with the plugged, whatchamacallit there. What am I calling it? I'm calling it my, I don't know, my stopper line. So we've got these loose. This should come out now. As soon as, I have a pan under here, by the way, and I am wearing gloves. You don't want to really get brake fluid on your skin. It's some nasty stuff. And as soon as I pop this off, we expect it to drip a little bit, but I'm just working this, making sure that it's going to, the threads are clear, so I can screw this temporary one in. And we'll take this temporary deal off, this plug off, after we get our new rotors on, our new calipers on. It'll be the last thing we do. We'll tie that all together. All right, so this is almost out now. Let me zoom in so you can see a little better. Right here. Yep. You can see it dripping. So I'm going to take this off and thread the other one on as fast as I can. I might just grab an open end wrench now. There we go. It'll be quicker instead of using the line wrench at this point, because it didn't strip. Now this fitting can be reused, so that's cool if you wanted to. We're not going to use it. Okay, come on, baby. She's dripping like a mofo. It's loose, but oh, there it is. It's okay. All right, so pull that down and out of the way. Let's screw our other one in. I'm sorry you can't see what I'm doing, but I'm sure you know how it's like screwing in a bolt, right? It's no big deal. And then what I'll do is, since that's kind of stripped, we're just going to use a pair of pliers. And just to get it to the point where it's not going to drip. And that'll save our fluid inside the master cylinder. Okay, so that's on there now. Hopefully you can see that. And the end's down there. You don't care where it is really, it doesn't really matter. But now let's get this caliper off. We didn't even have to worry actually about this side if you're replacing it, right? If you're replacing your caliper, and it's a caliper, not a caliber, you wouldn't even need to really worry about taking this line off, because you've got your new stuff. But I want to be anal and remove it. just because I believe I'm going to need to use these fittings in another location, which hopefully I'll show it to you. There's a brake line on the driver's side right below the master cylinder that goes to the left caliper, a hard line that has a leak, a very, very slow leak, which is not good. I'll show you that location. So maybe if you guys are working on a Tundra this generation, you can look for that and maybe prevent yourself a future problem. You know, because if you lose your hydraulics here, you're not going to have any brakes. And I've been down that road. It's pretty scary. So here's our other piece, and that fitting came out pretty decent. So we can just cut the line and scab that sucker. Let me show you what was going on with the upper bracket, since you couldn't see it, you know, when that bolt snapped at 11 millimeter. So basically this bracket here, here's our brake hose, here's our brake line that we just, you know, temporarily got fixed up. By the way, that's holding well, no leaks. Don't step on the brakes, by the way, when this is on here. If you step on your brake pedal, the hydraulic fluid, if there's fluid there, it's definitely going to pop that right off, and then it's going to be dripping everywhere. So keep that in mind. Anyway, right here, hopefully you can see it, on their upper control arm, this goes up here to the upper ball joint. There's a hole back here, right there. That's where, right there where my finger is, that's where the 11 millimeter bolt was. And then there's a hole on the back of this bracket right there. We'll just put a new bolt in with a nut and cinch it all up when we're done. Let me show you another trick. So I had to replace one of the lines that goes from the driver's side down there all the way across the back here and then into the ABS module. So you can see the center one here is nice and shiny and new, because this line is new. I went with a factory Toyota instead of making my own. But here's a little trick. So when you disconnect this, if you don't want fluid flowing all over, you know, your brake fluid, so your master cylinder is over there, and it just starts pouring out when you disconnect, you can make a plug. So here's like an original flare, inverted flare. You see that right there? And you see how this nut, line nut, sits nice and tight. Well, that's how you get your seal. But unfortunately, it's very hard to find a plug. They make plugs, or they're hard to find a plug that's pre-made, I should say, that fits here. If you just put a regular bolt in there, it's not going to seal because it won't have the flare on the end, the inverted flare. So let me show you what I do and what I've done. So I take this, you can get these flare nuts separate. And what I did was, so you can see there it is, it's flared, right? Well, this one happened to be factory that we took off of those little brake lines, the old ones, one I salvaged, and boom, welded up the end. So here's what it looked like before. So that's your brake line. I just cut it right off, and you can see the flares there. And then I'll put this in the vise and then weld that solid. So what I did was unplug the line here and then just threaded this in temporarily, so fluid didn't keep pouring out, and then you don't have to bleed the system as much. So that's a little trick there. If you don't have, you know, a factory line like this, or flare line, you can just go ahead and make your own with a flare tool. Now I have one, and I have a video of that, so I'll put a link to that somewhere here, either on the screen or in the description, or both, and how to make these. These are pretty simple. It's not too tricky, and you can buy this line separate. This is 3/16, and the copper and nickel stuff bends pretty easily. So hopefully that'll give you an idea. Now, if you do a lot of off-roading trail stuff, you may want to make up one of these. You know, see how this is threaded, full threaded, and then the other kind here that I showed you earlier, which is, you know, they call it unthreaded. That lead at the beginning, at the front here, and have both of those welded up, so that if you break a line while you're out on the trail, you're off-roading or whatever, or wherever you are, you blow out a line, you can actually block it off. So if you want to make one of these plugs, what I suggest you do is get a union, and these two unions join a line this way and that way, so you can extend it out or repair. Anyhow, it has the down there, it's just like your regular fitting would be on your brake hose, or, you know, your caliper, that kind of thing. Well, what you would do is, with that flared line right there, you want to screw that in to something like this, because if you don't, it's possible that the line could move on you, and you need this tight, like right there. See how it's back? So you don't want to weld this right here with that back. You want this nice and firm, and when you screw that in to something like this union here, let me do that. Let me demonstrate it for you. What it's doing now, it's keeping that flare nice and tight. So you could either, you know, cut this off right here, and then what you do is go into your vise. I'll just pretend we're gonna, let's say we're gonna weld this one up. So we thread this in. We want to make this one a plug. So we thread that in nice and tight so that that line is as high as it can. You can cut it flush, and what I do is put it in my vise like that. Let me clamp my vise down here, stop it from moving. So that's nice and firm now. And then take your grinder. Let me grab that over here. And if you don't have a grinder, you can use a file. And then the purpose is to get this pretty flush and to clean up the metal. We don't want any rust and stuff there when we weld, because that's contamination. So that's pretty clean, like that, right? And now we can take our MIG welder, and my camera's too close. I don't want to weld right here and get any splatter chance on the lens. But anyhow, you would just weld this up right here. Make sure you have your gloves and your safety glasses. Just put a quick weld right around there. Boom. And once that's done, it'll look like this. And then you can take, you know, your grinder again if you want to clean up your weld like I did. Just make it look pretty. And that's it. You're all set. You got a plug, and there's your flare right in there for your sealing. So if you have a couple of these on hand and you're off-road or you're on the road and you have a failure on one of your lines, you can block it off, plug it off with this. So that's it. You're all set. So everything's finished up. You can see the new line right there. And I also installed a new brake hose. So just keep in mind where those fittings go. If you have the non-threaded lead, I guess they call that, that one goes up top right there, and then your standard full thread goes down here in the caliper. Thanks for stopping by. I'll see you on the next one. Take it easy.